Hey folks, Aller here, and today we're going to take a look at NZXT's S340, which is a smaller and more budget-friendly case that follows some of the same design features as the larger and more expensive H440. We'll be taking a look at the special edition that's been designed in partnership with Razer. It's basically the same as a regular S340, but with a few changes here and there, like a Razer logo on the front and green accent lighting from the bottom of the case. The S340 is a compact mid-tower case. It's available in black, white, black and blue, black and red, and the special edition we're looking at today. Normally the S340 will cost about $70 for all the color options I mentioned, but the special edition we're looking at today comes in at about $100. The dimensions of the case are 445mm in length, 432mm in height, and 200mm in width. The case is a completely steel construction, which supports mini ITX, micro ATX, and ATX motherboards. The case weighs in at 7.29 kilograms or 16 pounds and comes with a 2-year warranty. Starting off with the front of the case, you can see the solid front piece with the Razer logo that's also illuminated with an LED. The front piece is more of a hollow shell that's open at the top and bottom to allow air into the front of the case. When removing the front cover, you should take note to be careful when removing the panel, as there is a wire connected to the front going to the LED that lights the Razer logo that you don't want to damage. As you're removing the front panel, you'll notice there is a connector right there along the wire, allowing you to completely remove the panel and put it aside as you're working on the case. Once set aside, you'll notice the dust filter, which is held in place by 2 magnets at the top and rests in a little notch at the bottom that holds the whole thing into place. As you can see, it's very easy to remove, allowing you to quickly pull it out of the case and clean any dust off that's accumulated. Once you remove the filter, you can see the 2 cutouts for the fans in the front, which, however, are not included with this case, as well as the longer holes cut for mounting the fans in the front. The front is capable of holding 2 120 or 2 140mm fans, as well as supporting radiators up to 280mm in size. Quickly taking a look down from the top, you can see just how open the front cover is, allowing for a decent amount of air to pass through the front of the case. You could also possibly reach the filter in the front without taking the cover off, since the top of the front panel is nice and open on this case, if you don't feel like pulling the front piece off every time you want to clean the filter. Moving on to the left side panel, you can see the Tinting Window just like the H440 I reviewed, as well as those captured thumb screws that stay attached to the doors so you don't end up losing them. At first glance, you can see the main cavity of the case is much larger looking in comparison to the H440, since there isn't a front wall piece where drive cages are usually hidden in the front. Instead, there is a bar mounted just in front of where the holes are usually cut to pass cables through to the front. That helps to hide all of your cable clutter and present a much cleaner appearance once everything is installed in the case. The S340 is also equipped with a power supply shroud just like the H440, although there isn't an NZXT logo here this time. There are 2 trays on top of the cover for your SSDs, and you can see some ventilation slots towards the front where your hard drives will be mounted in drive cages below the cover. We'll get to that when we swing around to the back of the case a little bit further into the review. The motherboard tray comes with a generous cutout for installing your CPU cooler and its retention bracket once the motherboard is in place. And you can see the case also comes with mounting standoffs for your motherboard already installed for a full ATX motherboard. Your clearances inside of the case can hold CPU coolers up to 160mm in height and graphics cards up to 364mm in length. If you're installing a radiator in the front, that number is cut down to about 334mm in length. The case also comes with 2 120mm FNV2 fans installed, one in the rear of the case and one in the top. Both are installed as exhaust fans, so you'll have to purchase extra fans or swap one of the included fans around to the front if you'd like more airflow into the case. The spot for the fan in the back is limited to 120mm, while the spot in the top can hold a 120mm or 140mm fan. Switching to the back of the case, you can see the mounting points for the rear fan, your 7 expansion slots, rear I/O cutout, and the button at the top that controls the lights on the front and bottom of the case. At the very bottom, you can see the bracket for the power supply that comes off and also has captured thumb screws, allowing you to mount the plate to your power supply and easily sliding it back into place. There's not much else on the back of the case, so we'll quickly switch to the right side of the case and take a look at the space behind the motherboard tray and the section below the power supply shroud. The right side panel has the same captured thumb screws as the rest of the case, and there isn't much else to it unlike the H440, which has sound dampening behind a lot of the panels on the case. Looking in the back, you can see the pre-run cables in the case for power and reset switches, as well as your two USB 3.0 ports and front audio connections. Now you'll also notice a couple of other wires laying in the bottom with a MULX connector. This is the power connector for the lighting and the two case fans that come installed in the case. Setting all that aside, you can see the accessories box resting in the drive cage area. Removing the box, you can see there are plenty of screws and zip ties to help you get your system set up and help with cable management. You can see there are plenty of spots around the back of the motherboard tray to organize your cables and zip tie them in place using the included zip ties. Taking a closer look at the drive area, you can see that the cage can only hold 2 hard drives, and there are mounting points you may not be able to see in the very bottom for 1 extra hard drive if necessary. I would recommend installing all of your hard drives first before installing the power supply, since you'll need all the room you can spare to screw in your drives on both sides of the cage, and I would recommend doing that just to make sure your drives aren't shifting around at all. And finally, you can see the back of the bar that hides all of your cables pass through to the front of the case. It's a nice little pocket allowing you to bundle all of your loose cables and tuck them into place out of way. This should help with keeping the clutter from getting too bulky and causing trouble putting the back panel on after installing all of your cables. And finally, moving to the bottom of the case, you can see those LED strips that glow bright green in that Razer theme color, along with a somewhat flimsy dust cover for your power supply. I would have preferred they included a nicer filter like they do on the H440 and other high-end cases that is something more like the filter in the front that quickly slots in and out. But I'm happy that there is a filter to keep dust to a minimum to some degree. It can be a bit of a pain getting this type of filter in and out, and placing it back you can see I have a little bit of trouble. Just take your time and be gentle about it and you'll eventually get it back into place without any problem. And while I'm struggling to get the filter back in place, you can clearly see the mounting holes for the extra hard drive that I was talking about that screw into the bottom of the case. And that's pretty much all there is to this case. Again, just like with the H440 I reviewed, I didn't encounter any significant issues building a computer with this case. The S340 is not as large or as spacious as the H440, and it definitely doesn't have as many features or as much expandability like the H440. But this is also more of a compact and budget-friendly case that offers the same build quality and aesthetic that you get with cases from NZXT. My complaints fall in line with that of the H440 as well, since this is basically just a smaller version of the case. I'm still a fan of captured thumb screws, even though sometimes they can feel a little stiff and gritty while using them and screwing them back into place. The Ssd trays on top of the power supply cover in the bottom also present the same issues. They weren't used in this build, but it is also worth noting that some drives might not fit on these trays. The SSDs used in my build with the H440 were exactly the same width as the trays, and since there is a lip on either edge of the trays the drives were supposed to rest in, I couldn't use them and had to mount them with the rest of my hard drives. It's something that you should take note if you're looking at mounting a particular SSD you already own or are looking to purchase with a new build in this case, and do a little bit of research online to see if anyone has any complaints about that particular drive not fitting on those trays. I really like the open design of this case, and it gives you plenty of room for a wide variety of cooling options, whether that's a large air cooler or a liquid cooling unit with a radiator in the front of the case. There's plenty of room for a large graphics card as well, so you shouldn't really have any problems fitting hardware inside of this case. The same can't be said for the back of the case behind the motherboard tray. This is a smaller, more compact version of the H440, so cable management was definitely a little bit harder to manage. I still think I managed to do a pretty decent job with all of the cables used in this case, but it can get a little cramped in the end, especially if you're running a lot of cables and are trying to hide extra cable length. But at the end of the day, after you've spent some time putting everything together and neatly tucking cables away, you should be left with a pretty clean looking build, and I'm certainly pleased with how things have turned out. The S340 is a pretty sleek looking case, and the special edition with the green lighting adds a nice touch to the whole thing. I hope you've enjoyed this review of the NZXT S340 and that it's helped you to make a decision on what your next computer case might be. I'd really like to thank my buddy Jeff for allowing me to do a nice review of this case while he was doing a small upgrade on his system, and I hope you've enjoyed this video as well. Thank you again for watching, and if you have any questions, comments, please leave them below in the video. I will try to answer them as best I can, and you can always subscribe to this channel for more content coming in the future. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.